Hello Wolfpack, back here today on Bitcoin. Some interesting progressions on Bitcoin, some very interesting progressions indeed overnight here in Australia. We've got the weekly candle close, we've got the ascending channel formation. That has, by the way, debatably, I wouldn't say it's broken to the downside yet, but it's had one of these very close calls, right? Obviously, this is not a very, decisive bottom line for the ascending channel formation. You could even argue under certain circumstances that this dotted yellow line is the bottom line for the channel. I would say it's not the case. However, we have been severely testing this bottom solid yellow line for support over the last few days, right? And we've had a daily candle close just below it, right? But I would say that that's not a breakdown just yet. Why is that? Well, first and foremost, just looking at the volume, I'm not overly convinced, right? It's pretty low volume. It is weekend volume, though. We have seen ascending word volume, which means that as the selling continues, more sellers are jumping into the selling, which means the trend downwards is strengthening slightly, but it's not as convincing as I would like to expect. And we can see that on the 4-hourly chart, we also have another area of support that we're still listing as this bearish pennant formation. So for those of you who don't know, Bitcoin is in a bearish pennant formation now. If we take a measured move from top to bottom, apply it to the breakout point, that's the flagpole, right? Apply it to a supposed breakout point. Let's say it breaks out right here. We're heading downwards to basically this lower dotted uptrending line, which is this lower dotted uptrending line on this chart here, which is going to be at around 36.5k. So if Bitcoin breaks below this pennant formation with this dashed line and the solid line going downwards, that would not only confirm a breakout of the larger bear flag slash ascending channel formation, it would also confirm a breakout of the bearish pennant, and it would send us straight to 36.5k within a matter of probably 24 hours. And what we can see as well is that, well, this is going to happen pretty soon. This decision is going to happen pretty soon. Why? Well, because first and foremost, we don't really have much room to move. Bitcoin is ranging right now between 40.4k and 30.6k. That's an 800 USD range. That is a 2% range. There's not very long that you can stay within a range like that. The Bollinger Bands are compressing massively. We're expecting a move on Bitcoin within the next 24 hours, to be quite frank, right? The longest we can stay in this bearish pennant formation, realistically, is 48 hours. I'm expecting a move within 24 hours, for sure. 100%, right? There will be a decisive move out of this bearish flag formation, either downwards or upwards within 24 hours. I would argue that downwards is much more likely. However, we can't be too bearish when we're still sitting on support, right? It is a bearish flag formation. That is a formation that breaks the downside around 72% of the time. So we have to, bet with the statistics here. We have to expect it to go down. Again, we're on major support, so we can't be too certain. But what we can be certain of is that, well, we're in a bearish flag formation, or if you don't like the idea of this being a bearish flag formation, sure thing, right? Even if you think we're not in a bearish flag formation, it is undeniable that we are an ascending channel formation, right? So we're in an ascending channel formation, which is a bearish formation that breaks the downside 72% of the time, or 73% of the time. And then we're in a bearish pennant formation within that ascending channel formation that breaks the downside 72% of the time. And so when you take that all together and you add that all up, you kind of end up with a result where a breakdown is probably, 80 to 90% chance of happening here. So it's very, irrational to predict this is going to break to the upside. It could happen, for sure. No one's saying it won't, or it can't. But the point is, it's probably unlikely. So, best case scenario, we see something like this on Bitcoin. We jump up, retest this downtrending dashed line, reject, do something like that, and then come down and crash below, ultimately ending up at this dotted line anyway, right? That's the best case scenario. I really don't see a scenario in which Bitcoin breaks upwards here. We've had multiple chances. If we flip over to something like the weekly chart, let me get it up. We can see how many chances we've had. We've been ranging in this region for a long period of time. Each attempt upwards has been met with a rejection from that critical line at the 50-week SMA. We got above it briefly. We actually fell back below it, which shows ultimate weakness. And now on Bitcoin, we've seen 3 continuous red candles in a row after an evening star formation. Again, a very bearish formation that leads to a continuation to the downside 74% of the time, right? Where am I getting the statistics from? Well, me and Regular Crypto have created a trading course in which we analyze these statistics over thousands of trades, okay? So this is actual data that I'm referring to. I'm not just pulling numbers out of my head, right? So again, very bearish formations forming across the entire market. The ascending channel isn't broken yet. It's holding on by a thread. It is a typical ascending channel. It's very traditional. It's kind of textbook, right? Descending volume, right? Descending volume, prices heading upwards. Textbook ascending channel formation. It's a pattern of exhaustion. It means that buyers are less likely to buy or less willing to buy at the higher prices. Eventually, it leads to a capitulation. And that's what we're going to be seeing here in the next couple of weeks, in my personal opinion. I think that within a week, Bitcoin, actually probably within 3 or 4 days, Bitcoin will be at this uptrending dotted line. That is my prediction on Bitcoin. Even if it swings to the upside out of this bearish pennant formation, it's going to reject from around 43k to 42k, and it's going to end up at that dotted line a couple days later. I don't think there's any chance of Bitcoin breaking upwards here. Of course, there is a chance, but I personally don't think there's much of a chance, right? I think that this is very much a downwards trend here. Although heaps of people always say on videos, I'm going to get 10 people saying it on this video, no doubt, well, if you're so bearish, why don't you short? I don't use leverage because I don't believe in leverage. I think there's too many scam wicks in this market. If you just look at the Bitcoin chart for 10 minutes, you can see how many long wicks to the upside and downside there are. You know, they're completely irrational. It's very unpredictable. In my opinion, high leverage is basically gambling. Low leverage, it's debatable. You can use it if you want to, right? But I personally don't use leverage. I personally don't long or short. I would say being out of the market completely, other than scalp trading, obviously, because I always scalp trade, is the same thing as taking a position in the market. So don't tell me to use a short trade, right? It's ridiculous. But yeah, I don't think it looks too good right now on Bitcoin. I think it looks pretty bad. And then, you know, if we move into something like the 3-day chart here, we can see that this is all just confirming what we've been talking about for months on the macro, right? I've been talking about this stuff since November. I've been bearish since November, right? Since 66k, you know, was my original bearish statement. And now it's just all playing out perfectly, right? With what we have on the 3-day chart here on Bitcoin, right? Very interesting, but it's very expected. Is we have 20 hours until we get to see if we close below this uptrending line, which is the 200 SMA on the 3-day chart. If we can hold the 200 SMA on the 3-day chart, we could very well see a bounce here on Bitcoin, right? A small bounce, right? And that is at 39.6k. So if the next daily candle closes below 39.6k, you can pretty much guarantee yourself we're going to see a crash here on Bitcoin, right? Why is that? Well, we don't need to look too far. Look at 2018, same thing happened. We held it for support for a long time. When we lost it, we crashed. Very simple, right? We compressed between them, and when they finally crossed over, we crash, right? We've compressed between them. When they finally cross over, which is going to be next month, we're quite likely going to see a drop, right? I don't know if it will be the same extent of 2018. You know, I don't know if it's going to take us down to our ultimate destination, which is a 200-week SMA or not, but I can be pretty certain that it's going to lead to some bearish price action, right? Moving on, we've got the 4-year cycle theory, and that is showing us that, well, this trend is very clear, and it's kind of suggesting we're going to see a 24k bottom on the 200-week SMA, which is this green line I'm bringing up right now, and that's going to happen in November to December. Now, the time frame is very debatable, right? There's not too much data suggesting when exactly it needs to be. November to December is probably the most likely prediction. It could happen as early as, I don't know, August, July, you know, but November to December is probably the most likely place we're going to see a bottom. Now, that's what I'm saying. So, essentially, time frame's very hard to predict. Price is very easy to predict, in my personal opinion. 24k is where we're going on Bitcoin. Looking at the BLX, and this is the Brave Liquid Index, right? So, kind of a long-term history of Bitcoin, and the weekly chart on that. What we can see is a new trend here. This is brand new information. I've never spoken about this before. I identified this the other day, and I thought it was compelling, right? You know, it's not super convincing. It's not got a super massive amount of evidence in there, but it's just an interesting trend that I've picked up on. I think that it could be interesting to see. As you guys would know, we are on the verge of breaking down from the ascending channel formation. We're on the verge of breaking down from the bear flag on Bitcoin, okay? So this is why it's interesting to me. Okay, so you might not be able to see this. Let me zoom out because my face might be in the way here, but... Okay, so the red line is the 50-week SMA, the blue line is the 75-week SMA, and the green line is the 200-week SMA. What we typically see is when the red line, when the 50 crosses over the 75, the blue line, right? Historically, we have found the bottom on Bitcoin on that exact moment on the weekly chart. So, let me go into 2015. Again, when the 50 crossed over the 75 in this yellow circle, we found the bottom on that exact day. 2018, when the 50 crossed over the 75, we found the bottom on that exact day. The 50 will be crossing over the 75 on Bitcoin in about 2 to 3 weeks, right? So that would suggest we find the bottom on the exact day on the 2nd of May. Now, do I think that's going to happen? No, I honestly, I don't think we're going to find the bottom that quickly. That's kind of irrational to believe. We're going to see, you know, I really don't think we're going to see a 47% drop in 2 weeks. I don't think that's going to happen. But it's interesting. It's interesting, right? So it's just something to keep in mind, you know. Who knows? You know, random stuff happens in the market all the time. I thought that would be interesting to bring up. And again, you know, it doesn't have to be an exact bottom, but what it does show us is that the 50 crossing with 75 is a pretty bearish indication. And so, you know, kind of makes sense. And then looking at the weekly chart on a base level, we've seen the weekly candle close just then. We rejected off the center line of the Bollinger Bands. What we see on the weekly chart is a flattening out on the MACD. Okay, so let me bring this up here quickly. So people say a lot of the time, well, we've just seen a bullish MACD cross. That's really bullish. I would say that, well, we saw the exact same thing in 2018. Look, in the same period, we saw a bullish MACD cross. It flattened out, right? And then it led to nothing, and we actually crashed down 50%. Right now, we're seeing a MACD cross. It's flattening out. We're actually seeing a bearish MACD cross come from that. And if it's going to be anything like 2018, we're going to crash down 50% or 40%, right? And then we're looking at stochastic RSI. People would say that this doesn't really predict tops too well. I would disagree with that. It's really not hard to see that this thing does, in fact, predict tops pretty well. Look at the top here in 2017. It called the top of the bull market. It called the top here before the COVID crash, okay? It called the top here before a crash from 12K to 9K. Okay, it called the top in January 2021. It called the top in both September and in November 2021 as well. Okay, so there's no, and now it's calling the top right now. Okay, in April, and as we know, we're looking pretty bearish. We're probably going to be breaking down here. So yeah, look, it's not the most accurate indicator, but to say it doesn't do anything is ridiculous, and it's flashing bearish, and so that's an indication. That's another indication out of many that we're probably going to be bearish here on Bitcoin. A lot of people would say things like, well, what about the massive hidden bullish divergence on Bitcoin? I think it would be between here. And, fair enough. There is a hidden bullish divergence there on Bitcoin. That's for sure. But I would also say there is a massive bearish divergence here on Bitcoin. And it's also extending downwards into a resistance line, okay? And we've recently rejected, and if we extend it like this, we've recently rejected from that vague resistance line, right? You can make it line up. And then, again, on top of this, it's like, well, what about this little bearish divergence we're seeing on Bitcoin, this hidden bearish divergence we're seeing on Bitcoin? So I don't really think the RSI is a very compelling argument to make right now, in my personal opinion. But looking at the total cryptocurrency market cap, similar to Bitcoin, it's in an ascending ascending channel formation, kind of, not really. But this uptrending yellow line here that I'll make pink just so you guys can see it quite clearly. This is the major line we need to be holding on the cryptocurrency market cap chart. If we lose that, you can see we've lost the entire bull market structure, and we'll head downwards to that accumulation region down here at around 1.1 trillion and 1.3 trillion, which is a drop of around, let's see, a drop of around, at least 30% up to 40%. So there could be a massive drop in the cryptocurrency market cap as well. I get a lot of people saying as well, I just want to bring this up briefly, that if war, macro situation, inflation, and everything like that couldn't push us below 33K back in January, why do you think we're going to go below now? Well, for the simple reason that the structure's bearish. It's not hard to kind of, I don't really understand what you mean by that. The structure's bearish. We're in a bear flag. We've got a bearish pennant formation. The 4-year cycle's flashed the November top. 4-year cycle triggers downwards. We've got a pending recession. Interest rates are rising massively, 50 basis point hike over the next couple months for sure. Bond yields are rising. I don't understand. Housing prices are going to be crashing soon. Of course we can go below 33K. I think that's a bit of a ridiculous argument to make. And I think it's kind of one of those arguments where it's like, all the facts, I'm just going to throw them out the window and I'm just going to think about it in a very overly simplistic point of view. It's like, the market can't go down because times were worse last month and it didn't go down more last month. So why can't it go? It's a stupid argument to make. Of course we can go below 33K. Of course we can go to 20K. Not 20K, but 24K in my opinion. Of course we can go there. Why can't we go there? Look at the weekly chart. Let's look at it for a second. Let's bring up the weekly chart and we'll just go, Coinbase is fine. Actually, we'll go to the BLX. And we'll zoom out here. The green line, right, is the 200-week SMA. That is where we've macro bottomed on Bitcoin on 5 separate occasions, okay? In fact, if you want to talk about how long we've been there, January to September, that's 9 months, okay? Plus, that's 5 months there, plus 14 months, plus 1 month. We've been at that region for 15 months, right, on the 200-week SMA. We've been there for 15 months in total in the lifespan of Bitcoin. Why can we not go there again? Why? There's no reason why we can't, right? It's above the all-time high in the last cycle. We've never retested an all-time high in the previous cycles before, so there you go. It's above the all-time high. We don't need to go to the all-time high. We need to go to 24K. We've been there for 15 months in the past. Why can't we go there now? Why? Because the institutional investors, guess what? Institutions are going to go under because we're going to see a recession, right? There's a reason why institutions are selling their risk-on assets, because the market's going to go down, right? So the institutional argument doesn't really make sense. And also, I think when people mention institutions, it's like, well, what institutions are you referring to? Are you referring to MicroStrategy? Because that's one institution. You know what I mean? That's the only one that's holding Bitcoin. You know, do you think these institutions want to hold Bitcoin forever? I mean, maybe, but like they're also, if they're buying it, they're probably selling it as well, right? They're probably playing the market to make money. If they see there's a recession coming on, which they do, obviously, and they're selling stocks, right? They're obviously selling Bitcoin as well. It's a risk-on asset. So, you know, I don't like the whole argument, oh, institutions, oh, what about the on-chain data? It's like, well, on-chain data, you can read it so many different ways, but it doesn't even mean anything. It's like, is it bullish or bearish? Who knows? Because you can read it so many different ways and there's so many different charts. You know, I don't like all those arguments. I think they're very easily morphed into fitting any argument. You know, I could easily use 10 on-chain data parts in this video to match my point of view, but there's another 20 that kind of go against it. It's like, what's the point of using it in the first place? I'd rather stick with the TA, and I'd rather stick with what I know about the macro environment. And what I know about the TA right now is it doesn't look good, and what I know about the macro environment is that it doesn't look good. So that's my analysis. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Check out the Crypto Academy. Me and Megawell created a Learn to Trade course. If you want to learn to trade, go ahead and check that out. The website link is in the description below, and you can find all the information relevant to that. Highly recommend you check that out. Thanks for watching. Cheers.